And today's story takes us out to the jungle, specifically the Amazon rainforest. And at the end of before I get into that, before I forget, please contribute to this too. I would love to hear what your thoughts are about your story. I would love to hear what your morals of the story takeaway are, so feel free to leave a comment in when I'm talking. And on Facebook, you can post it and we can come back and interact on it later on. As I was saying, this story takes us out to the Amazon rainforest. And once upon a time, there was a group of frogs walking. Well, I guess frogs wouldn't really walk, would they? Unless they were the dancing frogs from the cartoons. So these frogs are not dancing frogs, which means they were hopping along. And as they were hopping along, two frogs had the misfortune of falling into a pit. This pit was covered up with muck and mud, and they had no idea it was there. And so the frogs fell, and the pit was deep, much deeper than anticipated. Immediately, the other frogs, with deep concern, surrounded the outside of the pit and began yelling for them. The frogs began to jump, and then they began to jump with a greater level of intensity, realizing that the top of the pit may be out of their reach. But each time they jumped, they would hit the wall and fall back down. Each time they tried, they were pushed back. And eventually, the crowd of other frogs told them that it was impossible. It was impossible to get out, they said, that you're stuck there forever, they told them. The frogs yelled at them. They said, "Give up. You have no chance. You're going to die in that pit. This is going to be your tomb." One of the frogs that was down below gave one final jump. And then he realized that his comrades, his friends, were speaking the truth, and at which point he fell to his death and died. He gave up on himself. The other frog, though, was not so keen to quit. And it kept jumping and jumping and jumping and pushing harder and harder and harder. And all the while, the friends above kept yelling at, "Stop! Stop! Give up! Don't put yourself through this," they would say. "Why are you torturing yourself this way?" they would yell. "You have no choice," they would tell the other frog. "You must give up. You're going to die. You can't get out. It's impossible," they would say. No frog, no matter how strong it was, could possibly make that jump. But the little frog in the pit kept jumping. It refused to quit. It refused to stop. And eventually, with one final jump, the little frog jumped higher and harder than it had ever jumped before. And it barely made it out. When it was up on top, the little frog was panting, breathing as hard as its little frog lungs would allow it. Do frogs even have lungs? If somebody's a botanist or anybody who is some sort of frog expert, you could correct me on that. I would really appreciate it. At which point, one of the frogs at the top looked at it and said, "Why didn't you give up? Why didn't you give up? We were telling you to stop. Didn't you hear us? Didn't you hear what we were saying? That was an impossible jump. How did you do that?" At which point the little frog said, "I'm partially deaf. I can't hear when I get too far away, any further than this distance. I can only hear basically from me to you. I thought," said the little frog, "that all the while you were cheering me on." The moral of the story, I would love to hear what your takeaway of it. For me, my takeaway is twofold. One, our words can have a profound impact on others. As they say, you must choose. And please choose wisely when you choose to speak today, or any day going forward. Because what you say about someone else, you never know how profoundly your words can impact them for better or worse. My second takeaway from this, and I would love to hear what yours are too, is that it matters not what others say. What matters most is what you choose to believe. See, the little frog believed that its friends were encouraging it. And perhaps it was that belief that helped the little frog tap into a strength that it never knew it had before. See, so often many of us will decide that the world, that life, that whomever, our spouses, significant others, friends, co-workers are against us. And in that, we find a weakness, and sometimes we'll wallow in it, and sometimes we stay in our perpetual pit, our proverbial pits. But what would happen if you instead decided that everyone around you loved you, supported you, encouraged you, and believed in you? Even if sometimes their words did not seem like the most articulate way to encourage you to do great things, perhaps it's just energy. And the energy they're putting into it, in the little frog's case, the other frogs are pretty intense. But it saw that energy as encouragement. And since it believed that they were encouraging it, it believed that it was capable of more. And more it did, until it eventually got out of the pit. Now, does anybody want to share their moral of the story? I have a couple minutes before I have to jump off.